It's the deep and dark places of this world that the dwarfs call their home. Through blood, sweat, and grim determination, they carved out an existence for themselves to not only live in, but to thrive. Reaching the fullest potential of their existence, dwarven holds are a thing of true beauty, and it always astounds me to what feats of delicacy this hardy people is capable. With their stocky frame, their bulbous nose, and their famed taste for the strongest of ales, they never struck me as a folk versed in the art of subtlety. And if you've ever partaken as guests in a dwarven wedding, you probably know what I mean. And yet they adorn their halls in gilded knots of fine and thought-out symmetry, and carve frail designs in every piece of equipment they use on a daily basis. A surprisingly sensitive people when it comes to their art of craftsmanship. But hardy they still have to be, for they're not the only ones setting their eyes on the prize that is the depths in the mountain. Treading slowly, Yutir shone light into the tunnel ahead of him. A sudden and unlucky cave-in had swallowed him and his cart, while they were being transferred from a different mine back to the hold he called home. The warm light of oil-lit lanterns was quickly replaced with the cold darkness of the mountain, as he fell down into its bowels. The fall was hard, and he was lucky to get away with only bruising on his body, the worst of it being a slight limp in his left foot that slowed him down even now, probably days after the incident. His chronometer was long broken, but he was experienced and had a rough feeling for the passing of time. But there was no telling if he was exact. He had waited on the rubble, yelling out to whoever might hear him. One day he had done so, to no avail. Alas, on the second day, in the silence in between his calling, someone did pick up on his demise. First, he had heard only the slightest of sounds, so quiet that it might have as well been just imagination. Yutir had a fine sense for the noises in the mines he had lived in all his years. But these sounds, so quiet that he had to hold his breath to really listen for them, sounded unfamiliar. Neither rock moving, nor dwarfs working. And as the sounds, ever so slowly, increased in volume, he realized with a sudden chill that they had come from a tunnel leading deeper into this abandoned network. Maybe he caught the attention of someone or something that should have never known of his existence. More days had now gone by, and he had long lost all sense of direction. His flask was already empty, but it really was the tank of his lantern that worried him. At Crossways, he had always tried to take the one where the air seemed least stuffy, but there seemed to be no end in sight. He knew they followed him, so his rests were brief and anxious. He never saw anything, but he knew that he wasn't alone. Lost in thought, the monotony of the tunnel was pierced by something else at the end of his cone of light. Yutir stood still, eyes squinted. A crate! He picked up the pace. An abandoned crate with 2 stools on either side of it. It looked like whoever was here last sat down on this makeshift table for lunch. The top of the crate still having 2 mugs, plates and a dented lantern on top of it. But most importantly, it had a map. Yutir placed his lantern on the table. It was a map of the system he was in! Lips that didn't have a drop of water in days stretched to a grin, and Yutir felt hope surging within him for the first time in his ordeal. His lantern flickered. No, not yet, he gasped. It was light, but it still had oil. A small rock fell from the ceiling, and Yutir froze. He set the lantern back on the crate and was silent. While inspecting the map, he had let his guard down and never heard them approaching. His right hand wandered to the hammer on his belt as he slowly turned to the direction he came from. A chill ran down his spine as he looked onto his fierce mate manifest. Just outside the light of his lantern, a sea of eyes gleamed red like rubies. All of them fixed on a single point. They had been following him for days. His brain, wanting it or not, made out the silhouettes of his pursuers, and he felt as if his legs would turn to mud beneath his torso. Just staring at the closest to him, its front legs just barely reflecting the lantern's light. There was a quiet crackle in the air, the sound of chitin and trembling mandibles. They were here for him, and there was nowhere left to go. The light flickered again, and with an uproar of chittering, the creatures rushed towards him. A lone dwarf, trapped in the spider's web, lost in the deepest, darkest places.